What is going on, Brooklyn Net fans? Hello, everyone. Welcome back here into another edition of the Brooklyn Boys Show. I am your host, Connor Long, as we're recording this right here on Wednesday, May 27th. Just about a month out from the draft. The rumors are starting to heat up. This is the time of year where teams start bringing prospects in for pre-draft visits. We start to hear, the mock draft season heating up and intel swirling from all the top insiders, and most importantly, when we really get to break down these prospects and who the Nets could be targeting in their 3 draft slots. And kind enough to join us right here on the show today, one of the best in the business when it comes to covering the NBA draft. He does it on his own YouTube channel. He does it on Twitter. You know him as Ben Pfeifer. Ben, how you doing? Appreciate you taking the time, man.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, Connor. I'm always thinking about the draft with these, pretty much always, but especially these last couple months. So I'm excited to talk about Nets and some draft stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we were kind of talking about this off air before we started recording. The Nets falling to 6, as we've discussed ad nauseum right here on the channel. It isn't ideal. I don't think anyone is painting it that way. But if there is a draft where you maybe want to fall a few spots relative to where you were supposed to be picking, it's this year's class, largely due to the depth. I was talking to a scout with a team a couple days ago who was telling me that 8 through 20 in this year's draft, just the pool of prospects that are going to go in that range is going to be probably the best pool we've seen in the better half of a decade, Ben. So kind of, if you could just talk to us about the pool of players that the Nets could potentially target at 6 and just what that looks like. Take it away on that front.
Yeah, I certainly agree that there's going to be a very wide gap in range, and it's going to depend from scout to scout, evaluator to evaluator. It depends on what they like. But the strength of at least that area of the draft to me is definitely in the backcourt with, your Michael Brown, Kingston Flemings, Keaton Wagler, Darius Acuff, LeBaron Philon, whoever it is. There are plenty of people who like, some wings like Nate Ament, and there's Yaxel Lendeberg, Adai Mara, even Morez Johnson you see some people having in this range. And then there are a couple, real wild card prospects. The main one of those I think of being Jaden Quaintance, Kentucky big, who, if not for his injury, would probably be, a top 10 lock pick. But of course, that's not how it went. But for Brooklyn at 6, I think, like you said, I have a tier of about 10-ish players starting around that range. So I think there's a ton of options that they could go with. And we're going to talk about Kingston. We're going to talk about the guards. And I think even though the Nets drafted a lot of ball handling and, guard play last year, there's still a lot of skill sets and like high-end talent that they're missing. So they're in a good spot. Like you said, especially, in a draft with as many, blue chip special players at the top, it doesn't feel good to fall to 6, but I think it's much better than, I was decently high on last year's draft class. I think this range is going to be much stronger this year than even it was last year, which I thought was a pretty strong class. And we've already seen some players in that range, your Colin Murray Boyles, whoever, be really effective. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with what you said there. And I think a notion that has been spread by some Nets fans that I vehemently disagree with is that, well, the Nets took all these ball handlers last year. They can't do it again in 2026. They can't take a guard at 6 solely because of Nolan Traore, Yegor Dioman, and Sarif, those guys that they took last year in the first round. After year 1, Yegor is really the only guy on that list who has solidified himself. Second fastest rookie to 100 threes. I mean, he possesses a ton of upside as it pertains to growing as a defender. Just the size overall that he brings, his playmaking ability. Like, I have no doubt that he's going to be a really good player in this league for a really long time. But after that, there were a lot of question marks. Traore improved down the stretch. He was shooting the ball well to end the season, but still struggled to find his consistency. Sarif, I thought it was a disastrous year for him. And with Powell and Wolf, the non-ball handlers, they had moments at times, but they never really showed anything sustainable. So when you talk about this team right now and their plans at 6 and how last year's draft could potentially affect that, I don't think it's anything severe. The Nets are not going to pass on Darius Acuff. They're not going to pass on Kingston Flemings or Keaton Wagler or Michael Brown or any of these guys because, oh, wait, we just took 3 of these guys last year. I was talking to someone a couple days ago who was telling me that none of these rookies outside of Yegor are going to be guaranteed minutes right away in year two. They are going to have to earn their keep. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some of these guys play a significant amount of games, at least to start the year in the G League. So, without a doubt, I do not think that the players that they took last year will impact their strategy entering this year's draft. And I want to talk about someone, Ben, that you've done a lot of work on and you actually sat down and spoke to on your podcast. We'll put the link to that in the video description down below. That being Kingston Flemings out of Houston. I mean, just right out of the start this season, he really put college basketball fans on notice. The way I described it, his numbers were video game-esque through the first 10, 15 games of the year and kind of stayed that way to close out the season. Reminds me a little bit when I watch him of like a Darius Garland type, really good shooter in the mid-range, does a great job of distributing the ball and making plays. You've spoken to him. You've watched a ton of his film. He's someone who's kind of been talked about a little bit at 6, but being overshadowed by the Michael Browns and the Darius Acuffs of the world. So your thoughts on Kingston Flemings, just an overview of him as a prospect and then his potential fit with the Nets at 6.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Kingston Flemings, have been for the most part of the last couple of years. And like you said, was lucky enough to get to talk to him and just affirm some of my thoughts on him. And, you know, the character stuff, it's hard for a lot of people on the outside to really parse since we don't know these people. You know, fans are just kind of taking clips from interviews and whatever and trying to glean, but can say firsthand that Kingston is just a wonderful human being, and teams do care about that. But as a player,
especially the Nets, by the way, the
Nets definitely care about priority. That. Yeah, so they're gonna love that. I'm not saying the other point guards in his range aren't great. I just don't know them personally. I've spoken to Michael Brown as well. I interviewed him last year. He's also a very nice guy. But yeah, I mean, Kingston as a basketball player is just electric on the ball and on defense. And I think a Nets team that desperately needs more athleticism in the backcourt would like him. And yeah, I've seen some people say like he's somewhat similar to Traore, but I agree with you that I relatively have some optimism for Traore long term. But you know, he was a pick in the 20s or whatever, mid-late
19
round. Yeah, right. That's not going to be the kind of player a team, you know, unless they just had an unbelievable rookie year, which, you know, Traore had some flashes, definitely, but I don't think he had like a special rookie year by any means. And Flemings has so much potential to improve in his weaknesses. I think so many of Flemings' weaknesses are fixable. His shot selection, I think, was influenced a lot by the context at Houston, the lack of spacing, his excellent mid-range shooting, free throw shooting touch makes me think that he can improve his three-point volume and become a more reliable shooter. And his incredible athleticism makes me think that he can become a better finisher as he improves his technique and his footwork and gets stronger. But we're talking about one of the most explosive players in the entire draft. Unbelievable speed, explosion, both horizontally and vertically. Excellent feel and processing on the move, the way he's able to make plays for others while going downhill at crazy high speeds is super, super impressive. And despite some underwhelming measurables, he has quite a bit of defensive potential to me. Was a downright, you know, I'd say relative to your average freshman guard, was a straight up good defender at Houston this year. Definitely had some of his issues, but yeah, unbelievable playmaker, really smart guy, obviously an exceptional athlete who uses his explosiveness well to get steals and, you know, even protect the rim a little bit. So I think Kingston, while maybe lacks like the sheer on-ball creation ceiling of someone like a Michael Brown, is probably a little bit more well-rounded, and I think also has a massive ceiling himself as someone who, you know, can be your lead guard, generating a ton of paint touches, kicking out. I think at his peak, he could be like a slightly better version of what we saw from De'Aaron Fox's peak. That lots of shades to me as guys coming out who weren't crazy high volume three-point shooters, skinny players, but had just lightning speed, very, very good intermediate touch. Obviously differences with those profiles, but as you know, before Fox started getting hurt and losing some of his juice, we saw him, you know, approach like all NBA level impact largely through his, you know, exceptional creation and some of the ability he has to generate steals and pressure the ball in defense. And I definitely see Kingston having that kind of ceiling, But even if he doesn't reach that ceiling, I think he's just too skilled and smart and, you know, athletic to really just like flame out and not have a role at all. So yeah, I'd like Kingston a whole lot, and he's my guard one in this class outside of Darren Peterson.
Oh yeah, he's such an interesting player, and like you said there at the end, Ben, which was a great point, he has that tantalizing ceiling in a way where he could reach that De'Aaron Fox level and be that type of player. But at the same time, due to all these intangibles that he brings to the table, from his personality, like you spoke about, and just his overall shooting ability, his speed, how he can improve defensively, he also has a high floor. So his bust rate isn't as high compared to maybe some of the other guards, like an Acuff or a Michael Brown to some degree, and he has the injury concerns that come with him to an extent as well. So yeah, I mean, Kingston's a really interesting player. I think he's going to be a top pick this year, undoubtedly. I think a point that you brought up in your interview with him that was really intriguing and kind of puts into perspective how dominant he was this year is he was at a Houston program, Kelvin Sampson, who doesn't like to play a lot of freshmen. And not only did he play an extensive amount, but he did an excellent job while he was on the floor, and it was good enough for him to declare for the draft. And one of the strongest classes we've ever seen after year one, where he's expected to be a top pick. You said you have him as your guard one, Ben. How much, in your eyes, how big of a difference is there between your guard one and Kingston to kind of, in your eyes, that second tier of guys below him in Acuff, Wagler, Brown Jr.? Just what does that look like?
I've got them all in a relatively similar range. I'd say, outside of Peterson, who's clearly above, I think Kingston and Michael Brown are like a half tier above the other guys to me. I think both of those guys have like either the size in Michael's case, or, the actual proof of concept to be more impactful defenders. But I do still have Acuff, Wagler, LeBaron Philon, and Ibuka Corey all in that same, mid to late lottery graded range. Corey's not common in that range, but I think he's phenomenal and in this level. But my take on these guards, which is, kind of a boring take. Everyone wants, hot takes or whatever. But I really do think it is pick your flavor with a lot of these players.
Sure.
I'd probably prefer Kingston. And if you could guarantee me that Michael Brown wouldn't have, recurring back issues, you see a guy like current net Michael Porter Jr., who like throughout the beginning of his career was just like constantly missing time with those back injuries.
He missed an entire season. Yeah, exactly. It was bad at the point.
And then, it has been able to find, more stable health. Like I think he played above 50 games the last like 3-4 years, played 81 games in 2024. So it's not like these injuries are just, going to stick with players forever, but it is risk involved, right? And we don't, I'm not a doctor. I haven't spoken to doctors about a guy like Michael Brown, but these are all considerations that I think make this group of point guards a really interesting one. And yeah, I think Kingston and Michael are like a little tier above, but all of these players, Keaton Wagler as well, who I think is kind of more of like a combo, but still like, in this range of talented guards.
Yeah, for sure. And then after that, it gets interesting because I feel like the guard range and where these guys are going to go, it's kind of right in that tier where the Nets are picking, and then the Mavericks, and the Kings, and the Clippers right in front of them, and then the Bulls at 4. What do they do is interesting. It's going to be guard heavy within the top 10, absolutely. But then after that, I feel like things really open up. Then that's when the Yaxel Lendeborgs of the world go. I feel like right outside the top 10. I mean, Ade Mara, Ben, is someone I've heard in conversations with people as a guy the Nets would potentially be in on. Another dark horse I've heard is Nate Met, and it's like these guys sound reaches at 6, but I feel like they're certainly obtainable in a trade back. Your thoughts on where the Nets stand currently at 6, as it just pertains to the overall board, and if you could see them move back at all?
I am generally pro trade down, but especially in that range, since like that's the beginning of a tier for me, and around the end of the lottery is the end of the tier for me. So it just makes sense to, move down. So to, move down, get some extra assets and get a player of like similar quality. I would definitely be into the Nets moving down and trying to pick up more picks, get more assets. Even though they picked so many times last year, it can never hurt for a young team to just keep taking swings or, get a useful player or something. But I think picking at 6, they could be fine. and find a real impact player. I think the one guy who I really would question would be Nate Ament, who I think they actually might like, honestly, just based on what they've targeted in the past. And he's someone who I view as more of like a, mid first round type player who you can maybe take in the late lottery. I wouldn't hate it, but I just think he is not that high of a ceiling player. Just, giant person who can really shoot. And like that'll get you on the floor. That'll get you.
Yeah, him and Yegor makes sense.
That'll get you in an NBA rotation for sure. But especially in a class like this good with this many like real star bets and players with really high ceilings, even if they might not have the size or the traditional measurables or shooting that you like.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a ton of ways to go. And you mentioned Mara. I would like that quite a bit. I think he'd fit really well in Jordy's offense, and I also do just have him in that range as a prospect, even though I am higher on consensus than him. But I'm curious to see if a guy like Mara gets pushed up the board because of the lack of centers, and some of the guards get pushed down the board because of just the massive surplus of them. And, still waiting on like a Tyler Tanner decision, but Christian Anderson staying in. You also have Burries, Ben Hurts, a bunch of options.
Koa Pete, where does he fall? I know he's kind of more of that shooting guard type, but like it was a surprise when I saw that he's going into the draft, especially just looking at like how he ended that season. And as you said, it's guard heavy, so that could cause some guys to slip. But you mentioned Braden Burries. He's a name that I've heard just like lingering in that top 10 range. I don't necessarily see it with him. Like he's not as flashy in my eyes as an Acuff, a Flemings, a Wagler. And look, that's not to say flash is everything. When it comes to these guys actually having success, it's much more than that. It's about having a tangible development plan in place for these guys once they are drafted and once they get into the building. But I don't know. I just don't see that same level of spunk, if you will, with Burries as I do with these other top guards.
Yeah, I generally agree with you. I'm a good deal lower on Burries than consensus in terms of like where I have him on my board in like the late teens, but I do still view him as like a late lottery level player. And like you said, he's not flashy. And like the way I think about it is like he doesn't have an elite trait to me. There's nothing there that's like so stand out aside from maybe his transition play. Like he is an unbelievable transition player, grabbing, not a lot of guards have his size and strength to grab and go, push in transition, super fast in the open floor. But like, that's not a super high value, like elite skill, especially when we talk about playoff basketball, which is the lens that I generally think about this through, right? Who's adding the most value in these high leverage games. But Burries could definitely be like a solid role player. He kind of reminds me of like a different flavor of Josh Hart with, the transition game and the rebounding, obviously, a little less, playmaking and athleticism and a little more shot making, but, just like a complementary to off guard / wing who's going to space the floor. He's going to, be able to attack a closeout, run a secondary pick and roll. I thought his defense improved a lot as the season went on, where at the beginning of the year, it was really, really rough. And then by the end, he was making big plays, both on and off the ball. And I thought his consistency improved. So Burries, to me, if you're looking for like a 3-and-D kind of contributor. And I think this is where like the tier system and the ranges are important, right? Because it depends on what stage of your franchise you're at. Like for the Nets, I'm probably not looking at a player like that, at least not yet. If I'm thinking about Brooklyn's perspective, we're still looking for more like foundational, high ceiling talent, and especially looking forward to the next couple of drafts. It is too early for this, and I tell people not to do this, but there probably aren't going to be as many like real game-changing all-NBA level ceiling guys. It's obviously early, but definitely would prefer to take a swing on a guy now. But I don't know if a team like the Warriors or someone, or someone closer to contention wanted to take Burries in the lottery, I definitely understand it. I think he has a pretty high floor and will be a good NBA player, even if there's not like a crazy high ceiling or anything with him.
Yeah, and I just don't see where the timeline matches up with the Nets, kind of like you alluded to there, Ben, because I think the Josh Hart comp is good. It's fair, obviously, when you add a couple things, take a few out. But the Nets aren't looking for a Josh Hart right now with the number 6 overall pick. They're looking to get a superstar. They're looking for someone with that untapped upside in a way. They're not looking for, like you mentioned, he'd fit with the Warriors. He'd fit with a team contending, but the Nets are starting from the ground up right now. I think if you really break down their roster and take out last year's draft, how many true assets do they really have that could,
Not many.
exactly be, even rotational pieces on a championship team? I think if you look at the roster, you see MPJ. Um, and then after that, it's like maybe
Clowney,
Dave.
maybe if he keeps
I
improving.
mean, Clowney's just so inconsistent. That's the issue. Like, he is so inconsistent between the ankle issues and then the inconsistency shooting wise from beyond the arc. I mean, you could argue Day'Ron Sharp maybe, but not as a starter. I'd say he's like an end of the rotation center. He's
Yeah,
a good
Sharp can definitely
rebounder.
play a role. Claxton too, at his best, I mean, has been elite, but it's been a minute since
Yeah.
he's been that level of player. But yeah, definitely not a lot of like long-term pieces on this roster. You're definitely right about it. I definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah, like that's why they need to come away with a game changer, and it's harder to do at 6 than it is at 2 or 3. But they need to find a way. Like Sean Marks has been touted for the longest time, and that's kind of been his lifeline, if you will, to hold on to his job, is his drafting and ability and being able to find talent. And I was actually talking about that with an executive a few days ago, and I was like, Marks gets all this credit for what he's done in the draft, but these guys really don't linger for a while. I mean, Dariq Whitehead is not even on the roster anymore, and he was a first-round pick. What was it now, 3 years ago? And what this scout told me that I think made a lot of sense is Marks does an excellent job of drafting for talent, not so much fit. I think we're going to see this year if he's learned his lesson in that regard, and it'll be very telling with who they take at 6 if he is drafting for talent or fit. Obviously, the right idea is you get a blend of both, and that's what I like about Acuff. That's what I like about Michael Brown. Those are like my top 2 guys in that spot right now. But the Nets are starting from the ground up. They need to start winning games quickly. So I feel like they need to come away with an immediate contributor, yet someone who still offers a tantalizing ceiling while filling out the roster in free agency, and just getting someone in the building, Ben, like a CJ McCollum, who could come in as a veteran ball handler, mentor some of these younger guys while still providing value. CJ is 36, I think he is now, but he could still contribute on an NBA roster. We saw it firsthand with the Hawks and the playoffs, like similar to the Kyle Lowry, Tyrese Maxey dynamic and what that looked like in Philadelphia. Bringing that to Brooklyn and being able to have him work with Traore, Yegor if they draft a guard at 6. And then the sexy name is Peyton Watson. That's the name that everyone's talking about, who's grabbing the headlines and folks want the Nets to swing on. So I think right now their mentality should be trying to come away with someone who has that superstar potential at 6, and then kind of trying to get these other rotational pieces acquired through the free agent market.
Yeah, for sure. I think I at least appreciated last year that Marks had a clear plan and a vision with the 5 picks, even if I wasn't a huge fan or didn't really agree with a lot of those decisions. There definitely was like some kind of vision there with the prioritizing of the feel and the playmaking and things like that. So, like you said, I'm curious to see where they go this year.
Yeah, and I think the experience too, especially with like some of those later picks, Traore and Sarif having played overseas, Wolf multiple years at Michigan, Powell having that track record to go with it. I feel like Yegor, Ben, was actually the most unknown among those guys. Like you didn't know what you had them. They took him the highest, and I think after year 1, he's been the clearly the best rookie so far. So who knows what they're going to do, honestly. It's so hard to predict. They've gone against the consensus time in and time out. So I feel like we kind of have a fair idea, but yet we still don't know. Like they could stun the world and take a Daymara or Kareem Lopez at 6. We don't know. It's similar to what happened with Yegor. I mean, I was talking about Yegor as an option at 19, not 8 last year. So I feel like with the Nets, there are going to be a lot of good options there, like we've spent the past 20 plus minutes discussing, but we just don't know which direction that they are going to go in.
For sure. They are a team that likes to buck consensus, which at least makes things interesting. At least keep things fun. And I think they're in a good position regardless. There aren't, to me, like the strength of this draft isn't just in like how good a lot of the players are. It's like there aren't too many landmines to me, right? Just guys projected in that range who I'm really not a fan of. You're like Cody Williams type prospects, for example. I don't really think there are that many players in this draft. So I think they're pretty, in a pretty good position to get a guy with, a real high ceiling outcome, or at least someone who can contribute.
Yeah, certainly. The Nets have 2 second-round picks. I'll say at the moment because they could move up in the draft, they could move down, acquire or trade away some picks. But Ben, are there any guys in the second round this year that you are really high on, maybe because of their fit with the Nets or just the untapped potential, just overall second-round sleepers for you in this year's class?
Yeah, some second round guys that I like, at least based on the consensus board. Terrace Reed Jr., a really
Mm,
skilled, strong, high
yes.
field big who I think has easy pathways to contributing at the next level. I'm a big fan of him. I'm a big fan of a couple of like the older guards too. Bruce Thornton, Jacoby
Okay.
Gillespie, Jeremy Fears. I think it's a really loaded guard class, even into the second round, where I see a lot of players who I think can be contributors. And then there are some players who have kind of been like late risers for me that still aren't super high on consensus boards, like Rafael Castro from George
Sure.
Washington, Isaiah Nelson from South Florida, guys with, really rare athletic tools and traits and, high feel. And in the second round, I'm generally looking for those like unusual guys. It's a Howie Roseman idea I stole that I'm sure many of you have.
Yeah.
We're looking for weirdos late in the draft. And for me, I'd almost always rather take a guy like, a guy like Bruce Thornton with just like a singular physical profile. Like there's really nobody built like him, like his strength, his length, his being as short as he is with his kind of skill set over a more like, traditional like rim running big or, 3-and-D
Sure.
wing who could definitely be a useful player. Baba Miller out of Cincinnati, another second round guy I like quite a bit, kind of like a tweener big, but highly skilled player, excellent passer in the short
Yeah,
roll
sure.
cuts, defensive versatility. So there's a short list of some second round guys who I like, and I think it'd be good fits for pretty much any team.
Yeah, there are a few interesting guys in the second round. Like, I just don't see that untapped ceiling with some of these players, and a lot of it's NIL. I
Yep,
mean,
for sure.
what someone shared with me who works for an NBA team was this exact words: picking at 34 in the NIL era is at like picking at 60. And I know NIL's changed a lot, but I never thought of it that way. And that's how stark the contrast is for some people that having a premium second round pick is now treated in previous years like an end of the second rounder, and it's forcing these guys to stay in school for a while. I mean, Ben, look at Richie Saunders from BYU. Like, that's a guy I really like. Good
Yeah,
leader, can
yeah, I
score the
love
ball at
Richie.
all three levels. But what is he, 24 entering the draft? Like, it's gotten so out of control. He's older than Josh Minot, Noah Clowney, all these guys on the Nets who've been picked within the past couple of years by a substantial number. So yeah, NIL has certainly changed the outlook of it. And look, I think Milan Momklevovic, I think that's how you say his
Um,
name. Uh,
Chilovich, I believe.
Momchilovich, there you go. That's a name I've heard in some conversations. The second rounders, like you said, you're looking for these guys who have high ceilings, who maybe won't contribute for you right away, but have the potential to down the road. And I think that's where a lot of these diamonds in the rough are found across the NBA. So, look, if the Nets make their second round, both their second round picks, I don't know. That remains to be seen. I guarantee if they do, that second guy will be given a two-way contract. I doubt that they will hand roster spots to 2 second rounders, but who knows if they even make those selections, if those are part of a potential trade up a spot or two or something like that, or they're traded for a veteran. Ben, there's so much like talk about these pre-draft trades this far out, like we are about a month out from the draft. I mean, they really all come together in the days or day really leading up to the big event. I mean, the Terrence Mann, Drake Powell trade was made a day before the draft last year with the Nets, and really most trades around the league. So I feel like there's a lot of chatter around all these trades, who can move up, who can move down, but the real meat and potatoes of it don't come until the day before or draft day, as we've seen.
Yeah, and I think this year's second round, while it's definitely going to thin out, at least, we've got, as we're recording this, like a couple hours
Yeah.
left until the official withdrawal deadline. But I do think there's quite a few players into the 40s who I feel pretty good about as like standard contract players, guys who I think could
Yeah.
realistically be impact rotation players or, future starters. So even picking into like the the early 40s, I do think there are going to be a good amount of decently interesting players to get at. But like you said, the draft is very much changing with NIL altering the decision-making process for a lot of these players who
Yes.
would prefer now to take the certainty of whatever NIL deal they can get, like a Milan Momcilovic, who's probably going to get a good amount of money in the portal versus like being a second-round pick. To me, it seems like an easy decision, but obviously there's a bunch of different considerations for all of these people, making these decisions. But I do think that there will always inevitably be good players who fall to the second round for whatever reason, and smart teams to take advantage of that.
Ladies and gentlemen, hit like, hit subscribe. Thank you all for joining us right here on the channel. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Ben, can't thank you enough for taking the time and joining us right here on the show. Great stuff as always. Have all your work linked in the video description down below for all those watching. But of course, let everyone know where they could find you. And if you have any final thoughts, basketball related, non-basketball related, feel free to share those as well before we wrap up.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on again. I appreciate the chance to talk about the Nets. Like you said, my YouTube channel is just my name, Ben Pfeifer. Same on Twitter at BJPF_. That's where I'll have all of my stuff. Definitely have some exciting content planned, and the genre of like interview, film breakdown, and some other stuff I have planned as well. So yeah, again, thanks for having me on, and I hope for your and all my other Nets fan friends' sake, that this year's draft goes well.
Oh, I hope so too, Ben. Thank you so much for taking the time again. Everyone follow Ben and the tremendous work that he does on his personal YouTube and Twitter account linked in the video description down below. That'll do it for us. For Ben Pfeifer, I'm Connor Long right here on the Brooklyn Boys Show saying have a great rest of your morning, your afternoon, your evening, everyone. And as always, go Nets, baby. Peace out.